name is Mary Beth Bergeron. I'm the president of the Longmeadow Adult Community Center Fund that is sponsoring tonight's activities or tonight's lecture. I am very pleased with, number one, the turnout, and number two, the individual we have tonight that is going to speak about kind of a local location with a lot of history to it. Many of us will have heard of it if you are basically if you are born and raised in this area, you are familiar with the Hazard Powder Company. We would not be able to provide the lectures that we have without the generosity of our donors. And tonight, for those of you who are interested, we have a brochure in the back, and there are more at the desk, of all of the events that our nonprofit has put together for the 250th anniversary of our country. We felt that you would all be interested in the history, the culture, and the patriotism that we celebrate on July 4th this year. And so we have developed a lot of many programs surrounding the 250th anniversary. Tonight, we have a reenactor, and his name is Elliot, I gotta pronounce this right, Levi. Chevy, rhymes with Chevy, Levi. Elliot is a reenactor. He was a retired business owner and educator with over 25 years of experience as a Civil War reenactor and presenter. He is captain of the Massachusetts Light Artillery, participated in many national Civil War reenactments, such as the Gettysburg, Antietam, Cedar Creek, as well as other local reenactments. Presentations include the Gettysburg National Park, Longmeadow Days, the Springfield Armory, Sturbridge Village, the Union Club in Boston, Storyton Village, Enfield Historic Society, and here at our last international dinner, where he came along with Stanley Sveck, another historian, local, well-recognized historian, and presented for the Treaty of Alliance that the United States signed with France, which was a pivotal moment in the revolution of our country. He is also a Revolutionary War reenactor with Crane's Artillery and is participating in numerous events honoring the 250th anniversary of our country. Now, that being said, that Crane's Artillery, here's Stanley Sveck walking in the back now. Crane's Artillery has agreed to come here to Longmeadow in June with their cannons and participate in an event on the Longmeadow Green. I hope that you make time to attend that particular event. Now, I also hope you make time to attend the town meeting in May, where the funds to pay for such an event, recognizing the Longmeadow participation, militiamen participation in the 250th anniversary of our country. And there are quite a few. And we need to recognize the heroism of all of the militiamen, the men and women who were heroes of our revolution. So that being said, Elliot Levi.
You didn't do it again.
I ruined it again.
Levy.
Elliot Levi.
But before I start, well, Mary Beth is up here. We owe her a real debt of gratitude. She does a phenomenal job for this town, and I don't know how recognized she gets. But I'm going to say this in my own opinion, because I was on the Longmeadow Historical Society for 15, 20 years and left. She's running circles around them, and she's phenomenal. So thank you for what you do.
You're welcome.
Bringing history to the town. And
well, we all need to know our history, right? Because that becomes our future. Thank you, Elliot.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, everybody. As Mary Beth said, I'm Elliot Levi. I'm going to get rid of this cane in a second. I'll do it now before I hurt myself. How many people here have ever heard of the town of Hazardville? How many people have been there? How many question where the name came from?
I'm thinking the power
Okay.
company.
Right. So tonight we're going to talk about a couple different things. We're going to talk about the Hazard Powder Company, specifically Augustus George Hazard. And then we're going to go into the production of gunpowder, and I'm not going to bore you with all the science because it's relatively simple, but the whole process of producing gunpowder and how they made gunpowder from 1835 to the last explosion in 1913. I'm going to show you pictures of the actual pictures. I have some here, but you'll see it on the slide presentation of the mills. And just what an incredible operation it was, and it really should become on the National Historic Register, and it's kind of just going. And there's graffiti, there's parties there, there's everything. And I'm really happy tonight I have my team of hikers back here, because we hike there every day, sometimes twice a day, and I've got to know it quite well. So we will begin. So, Colonel Augustus George Hazard was born in South Kingston, Rhode Island. He was son of a sea captain. Yes, Mary Beth? How are you doing? Why are you doing this to me? Testing. There's no pocket. What are you going to do to me?
It's there.
I'm out of here. Now, what did I say? Stan. Look. She got yours last time, right, Stan?
She nicked me last time.
I know, I was here. So he was the son of a sea captain named Thomas, and his mother's name was Silence. And I'm not going to touch that one, but I told my wife that, and she gave me a bad look. So at a very young age, his father decided to move the family to Columbia, Connecticut. As a sea captain, he saw the problem that was going on in the world, especially with the British starting to take over American ships. And he wanted to get away from the ocean because he didn't want to get brought back and have to be a captain again in what happened to be the War of 1812. So Augustus, as a young man, became familiar. Obviously, his father was a painter, became familiar with paints. And at the age of 15, he decided to strike out on his own. He went to West Hartford, and he was painting there. He's painting in some of the more expensive homes in the area. And then he moved to Savannah, Georgia. And in 1820, he met an Allen Denslow, who happened to be from the Suffield, Enfield area. And they struck up a friendship, and they went into business. And they established a business selling paints, varnishes, lead, whale oil, brush, varnishes, and painter's supplies. And when he was in West Hartford, Gus met Salome Merrill. And he went back up to West Hartford, asked her to marry him, and she said yes, and then they moved back to Savannah, and ultimately would have 6 children. And while Hazard was in Savannah, and we went to Savannah not too long ago and saw exactly where his business was, right on, it's called Factor Row, right on the Savannah River where the Hyatt is today. That's where he had an office. And he was a trader, and he would buy package ships that would come in, and he would take all the cargo, put it in a warehouse, and sell it. So he was an entrepreneur as a very young man, very risky because he had to go borrow money to finance everything that he did. Eventually, he decided that he wanted to leave Savannah and move up to New York City and establish a business in New York City. He stopped the trading part, and he really got more involved with brokering gunpowder. And he was starting to make a lot of money selling gunpowder. And then he got the idea, well, if it's so good to sell gunpowder and everybody's buying it, why doesn't he get involved with the manufacture of it? So coincidentally, Allen Denslow struck up an arrangement with the Loomis brothers, 3 brothers, and they started the Loomis Denslow Powder Works. Yes?
Did he have any connection with the Hagley Company on
Stay tuned.
the brandy wine?
Stay tuned.
Okay.
That's DuPont.
That's DuPont,
Yeah,
yes.
we don't talk about DuPont yet.
Okay.
We don't want to get arrested. Okay. So, yeah. Oh, okay, well,
I'm sorry.
I got no, I'll be over here. Okay. All right? It's a tough crowd. Now I can't see the screen. Show's over. All right. So, the Loomis brothers, 3 brothers, and Allen Denslow start a powder company. And, of course, they're friendly with, Denslow was friendly with Gus Hazard. And this is, it's hard to see that, but that's a layout of the Hazard Powder Works as it evolved in Enfield. And there's much better pictures up here. And this is also another map of that area. So it's, you know, if you've been down to the Hazardville area, you know the red barn, the big barn? Okay, that's kind of where it all began, right across the street. That barn was built in 1845. The first mill was 1835. All right, so they bought 400 acres of land and decided it's a great place to build a mill. And the hollow is literally in a hollow. So we've got that, what they thought would be good protection in case there were explosions. But, you know, Scantic River runs right through it, so you have tremendous water power. And it has access to a railroad out in the Skidegoo section. It also had access to the Connecticut River. So it was really a good site to build a mill. This is the tomb of the Revolutionary War surgeon who owned it. His name was Allen, Dr. Allen, and they bought, Loomis and Denzil bought the property, the 400 acres from his widow. And this is the first mill that was built right here in 1835. The barn wasn't there yet. All right, but that's the first mill. And that had big rawhide bags in it, and they put in brass balls, and they put in the ingredients of gunpowder, which I'll discuss in a little while. And it all tumbled around and pulverized and came together as a mixture, and that's how they originally made the gunpowder. Why they didn't have more explosions then, I don't know. But there's certainly more to come. But that's the original mill building. All right, and then in 1836, they built this dam. And the remnants of this dam, that wall still stands today, and there's some ruins over here. But that's the original, what we call the lower dam. Imagine that, that's 1835, 1836. We think, and don't know for sure, that this brownstone came from East Long Meadow. And a vast amount of the stone used, just massive stonework down there. It's one of the churches in Hazardville bought stone from East Long Meadow, so why wouldn't they use that? So if you go down there and you park at the parking lot at the Powder Hollow State Park, you can see the ruins right there. Okay, so Hazard decides, I'm going to get in the game. He wants to be a manufacturer. So he picks up 25% of the share of the company with Alan Neelan Parks and Loomis and Alan A. Denslow. So now he's a manufacturer. And there's my idol, Gus Hazard. The Loomis brothers sell their shares to Hazard for what's equivalent then for $66,000. Do the math, multiply it by 30. That's rough with inflation. That's really what that purchase meant. So it's a tremendous amount of money. So now Hazard is now the majority stockholder in the company, and he decides to move from New York up to Enfield. And he also maintains an office in New York where he's selling the powder out of and trading powder there. And this was his home in Enfield. It burned in, I think, the 70s, if I'm not mistaken. But it was a very ornate home. The stairs, the center stairs, cost him $20,000. And how did he get the 20 grand? He brokered a ship of potassium nitrate, saltpeter, came out of Calcutta, and he sold it to somebody, made his money, bought the house, and put the staircase in. So, quite a guy. And this is an artist's rendition of the house now. In the case, that's right on Route 5 in Enfield. So, what's evolved? Hazard Powder Works is starting to grow. Now he's there. It was 400 acres, stretching 1.5 miles by a mile. All the buildings were conducted that had powder, anything to do with production of powder. All the buildings had a loose side. They were made with wooden pegs, and they just lightly tapped the side in because they wanted, if there were an explosion in that building, they wanted that side to blow out. And most of the time, that side was faced towards the river, if the buildings were near the river. So the expression came, if you cross the river, it means you're gone. Because if you cross the river, I'm going to read some anecdotes in a minute, and you'll find out how you really cross the river. It's not with a bridge. Okay? And all the latches were wood. The buildings were unheated, So in the dead of winter, like that cold spell we went through, so they were sometimes working 24 hours. They had warming huts far away from the building so they could have a fire in a warming hut. But they had to go back in to the building and reset the machinery. They never really were in these buildings very long. And nobody knows what caused one of the 37 major explosions. Because whoever caused it, whatever happened, they're gone. They were blown to glory. So like I say, over 200 buildings. Workers changed their clothes in a wash house. Now, why did they do that? Well, the wash house was where they had to go in and they had to make sure that they were inspected before they went to work and when they left. They couldn't have any cuffs on their pants. They couldn't have any pockets, no matches, on and on, anything. They checked their shoes. Their shoes had wooden pegs on the bottom because they're looking not, to create want to create a spark. There's so much dust in the air that they changed into work clothes and left the clothes there, and then when they went home. So this is an individual, Donald Perone. I am going to wipe out my new mutton chops, but I'll try it. Donald Perone was a workman employed in the powder mills, quite seriously burned while at his work Tuesday night of last week. Perone was lighting a lantern when the powder dust on his hat ignited, and as he was endeavoring to brush the fire out, the flames spread to his coat. He rushed out the door and extinguished the flames by jumping in the canal. Perone was badly burned about his hands and back, but he's now improving. I'm going to warn you, they get worse. The media then was very graphic. No filters. Okay. So on Hazard Ave, as we call it now, there were the churches that had stained glass windows ultimately bricked up the stained glass windows. And I'll show you soon that all the implements were made out of wood, and they made average pay was $1 to $3 a day, and no benefits. And if somebody died while working in the mill, they didn't have any life insurance, but your spouse could get a job there. Pretty good deal.
Yeah.
Elliot, what year are we talking about here? The 1830s?
The life of the mill is 1835 to 1913.
Okay, so when you're in this phase, they're making black powder.
Yes.
This is black. They're going to go smokeless later, I'm sure.
Right. Yeah, but smokeless came in, right.
Yeah, so you don't really think about black powder being so dangerous, but it was.
Just wait.
Wait.
You know. Okay. And and the stool, you'll see a stool. If they had to sit on a stool as a one-legged stool, why? If you fall asleep, you're not tending to your equipment, right? You go to glory again, so it was a one-legged stool. So overall, there were 38 major explosions from 1835 to 1913, and 66 men and 1 woman died. Any questions so far? Yes.
Is that in total for
Yes.
all of those explosions?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So I'm going to show you some of the pictures of the original works now. This was the office. Part of that is still there today. Oh, it's been remodeled a little bit. You can see the horse-drawn wagon. We'll talk about those in a second. This is some people working in the office. I believe this is in New York. And then we have a board meeting here. I believe that's in New York. And then these gentlemen, I believe, were in Enfield. That's who was on the board of directors of the Hazard Powder Company. Okay, so a lot of things figured into why this company grew so fast and the demand for powder. We had the Mexican-American War in 1846, the California Gold Rush, of course, caused a lot of power. And we had the Crimean War before this Crimean War. So we had Russia fighting England. And guess who Hazard sold to? Both sides. Why not? So some things don't change, I guess, huh? And then, so during the height of the Civil War, which we'll get to in a minute, that powder mill collectively was turning out 12,500 pounds of powder a day. Pretty massive operation. I mean, think about it. And we'll touch on it a little bit, but one of the things that actually fueled the growth was in Hazard passed away in 1868, which I'll talk about in a minute, but his descendants, or the directors of the company that stayed on, started to conspire. You asked me a question about Hagley and DuPont, but Hagley. So they formed the Gunpowder Trade Association. It's conspiracy. They rigged prices. They decided who they were all going to sell to. 6 companies engaged in the Gunpowder Trade Association. So that helped keep prices up, and all the mills were able to stay busy because gunpowder is a commodity. Prices were fluctuating up and down, just like gasoline did 3 days ago. Yes?
I think it's interesting we're in Firearms Valley. So you got the Springfield Army up here,
Right.
and all the other firearms industry all around.
Right.
Were they making gunpowder too? I don't know.
I don't think so. They were making cartridges, I know, for Colt. And that's a great thing too, because look in the valley that we were, Remington, Colt, the Springfield Armory, of course, Ensign Bigford over in Simsbury. They were making fuses, so part of this operation made fuse powder, made fuses out of. Yeah. So these, and of course the railroad expansion out west, mining, sport shooting, but the greatest output of the mill came in 1880 to 1990. They did 6.25 million pounds of blasting powder and 2.5 million pounds of sporting powder. I mean, just amazing operation. Okay, so, a little aside, Hazard, I think, was a pretty astute businessman, and I think he was kind of aggressive. So, in 1849, 5 of his employees decided they're going to strike out on their own. And my sense is Gus Hazard didn't like that at all. So they were establishing operations out in the Skidegoo section of Enfield. And we've been there, we see what the ruin's like. But some things started to happen to him. Well, first thing Hazard did is start to drive the price of powder down. So he did a little predatory pricing. Lower the price of powder in the market. These guys can't make much of a living out of that. So they were under financial constraints. And then there's a whole host of coincidences, and I'm not laying this on Augustus Hazard, but there was one of the incorporators, you see Tudor Gowdy, he had a gin mill. And down in Enfield back in those days, he used to say, I'll go have a Gowdy. And that was a glass of Gowdy gin. But that burned, and Gowdy didn't have any insurance. John King was one of the incorporators, and his barns burned, no insurance. And John King, he died, that was okay. But in 1852, the residents of that village got together and decided to change the name to Hazardville during that period. And then we had some explosions there in May of '53, and then a really gruesome explosion in June of '53. Walter Luce Sr. and Jr.'s injured, but he survived. Walter Luce Sr. was killed, and the account of that is, and Mrs. Luce was widowed 3 times. Her husband, 3 of her husbands died at the mill. And there's a very gruesome account of Walter Sr.'s foot flying through the air and coming down as a thud on top of one of the buildings that survived. But I didn't bring that one. So finally, in February of 1854, Hazard makes them an offer they couldn't refuse, and that becomes part of the Hazard Powder Works. So whatever happened here, if it was nefarious or not, I'm not quite sure, but they're gone. Hazard had a nephew, George Hazard, and he moved back to Enfield, and he didn't like what he saw. So he put this pamphlet out saying how dangerous it is, how everybody's going to die in Hazardville, and that the town should vote to close them down. So that upset Hazard quite a bit, but that was a big to-do back in those days. It was dangerous what they did, because you see all the explosions. I mean, just a wagon load of powder leaving by the Scantic River by the barn has to go up hills. And on Powder Mill Road, they put berms in the road. They call them thank you ma'ams. So when the drivers are driving the wagons up the road, if they fall asleep, they're going to get jarred, kind of like a speed bump or what we have on the pike today when you go over too far. but they did that back then. Like I said, they called them thank you ma'ams. All right, so Hazard had a lot of tragedy in his life. It wasn't all smooth. His son, Horace Hamilton Hazard, was working for him, and he was the heir apparent. And this is a cohort mortar that would fire a 32-pound ball. And I could show you where those ruins are. There's just some footings from where that was held down. And the way you tested the powder was that you loaded 1 ounce of powder into the mortar, you put the ball in, and you set it off. And if the powder was good, it had to go 300 feet. That's how they tested it. So Horace was over there testing powder, and he had a gruesome death. When you load powder in a mortar or in a cannon, a lot of things you got to worry about. One is the preceding charge. Are the embers out? When we're doing any cannon, Rev War or Civil War, we sponge the barrel. Ever see who's doing that? Well, one of it's a wet sponge. The other's a dry sponge, so you want to get you want to dry it out so the powder will ignite. So don't know what happened, but he put a fresh round of powder in, and it blew up, and it took off half his side of his body. Just horrible. Anybody see Breaking Bad? That was what happened to Gus. Yeah, that's exactly what happened. Just the whole side of it, and he lingered for a horrible 2 days. So that was, a lot of tragedy for Hazard. And then his other son, Samuel Douglas, younger, just enrolled at Yale, and he died of consumption, which is TB. So he was left without really any heirs. His daughters didn't want any part of it. One married the governor of Massachusetts later on. But that's how they would test the powder. So we get into the intrigue of people say, was Hazard a Civil War, a Southern sympathizer? And I don't think so, but one could make a case. So he had visitors at his home, that beautiful home he showed. So if Jefferson Davis comes to your house, you kind of know where his leanings are. And in all honesty, Davis and the South, prior to the Civil War, right before, they were trying to put in as many orders as they could with the Hazard Powder Works. And they were successful in getting some orders shipped to the South. Raphael Semmes, who ended up becoming an admiral, Raphael Semmes, ended up coming to his house and pitching him to get powder sent down south.
They probably went to Ames right after this, because the Ames Sword Company in Chicopee had the same issue.
Yeah.
They were selling to both sides.
Both sides, yeah. Because, nobody knew it was going to happen, but you thought it was going to happen. And then Daniel Webster comes. Well, he was a Whig. That's the party he was. And he was for popular sovereignty, and he wanted slavery to be kept in the South. So there's, and with that, you could make a case, too, of where some of the leanings were. And that's why they said he had some Southern sympathies. Well, on April 12, 1861, the Confederates fired on Fort Sumter, and the powder on both sides came from the Hazard Powder Works. General Pierre Gustave Torte Beauregard, on the southern side, fired at his West Point instructor for artillery, General Anderson. And that was a horrendous cannonade. Nobody was killed on Fort Sumter until they took the flag down. And while they're taking the flag down, they fired a gun salute. A cannon shattered and Private Huff was killed. But it was Hazard powder that did it. All right, so right away, Hazard writes a letter to the local paper saying, I'm all for the Union. I'm going to donate money to buy the Enfield residents' soldiers' uniforms. I'll help supply the Union Army. The other thing you could say about him was when you read some of his speeches, he was not an abolitionist by any stretch of the imagination. Neither were about 40% of the people living in the North. So it wasn't that common. We look through the lens of 2026, but back in those days, what I read, I could be wrong, but the large segment of the population was not for abolition. People were scared for jobs, a whole bunch of things. And we had draft riots in New York in 1863. after Gettysburg ended, Lincoln had to send some troops up to New York to dwell right. They were scared that all the freed blacks were going to come up and take jobs. So it was an incredible time for this country. But I don't think that Hazard really was a Southern sympathizer, even though he lived in Savannah and did all this. I mean, he's really smart and he covered it up. So that Hazard donated money, and that was built soon after his death. If you go down to the Hazard Powder, you'll see the Hazardville Institute. He donated money to build that, and that's today. And it's empty, and there's a foundation, but nobody's using it. And that was going to be the community center for the village of Hazardville.
No parking lot.
In the back, but not much.
Well, they don't own it though, really. There's a lot of stuff going on about that right now.
I bet, yeah. Yeah, I'm out of the loop on that. I went to a couple meetings. Okay, so Hazard's in New York on business in early May. And on May 7th in 1868, he's at the Astor Hotel, and he gets really sick, and he lingers for about 2 weeks. He died he got smallpox, and then he got pneumonia. And it was a long, slow death, poor guy, and he passed away and came back to a huge funeral in Hazardville, Enfield area. All right, so we're going to leave Hazard right now in the Hazard Powder Works. We're going to pick it up again soon, but this is gunpowder. This is black powder. This is how it's made, okay? So, 75% saltpeter, or potassium nitrate, and that first came from Calcutta, and then nitrate of soda from Chile. So they'd be bringing boatloads of that over here. 15% sulfur, and they would get that from Sicily, and 10% charcoal. Anybody can get sulfur, and anybody can get potassium nitrate, but the Hazard Powder Works had the best charcoal, and that's an accelerant, and that's from the alder trees that grew all around there. And it was a speckled alder tree. It's in the willow family. And we climbed up Soapstone Mountain one time in summers, and you get up there, there's a little plaque and talked about the harvesting of the alder trees, shipping them down to the Hazard Powder Works. They got $5 a cord. That's a lot of work. So those are the ingredients plus water. And that's all that's in gunpowder, black powder. All right, and this is how it arrived by ship to the Hazard Powder Works. And there's your three ingredients: sulfur, charcoal, and the potassium nitrate. And it would so here's the process. It would get they would pulverize the sulfur, so there was pulverizing equipment. I'll show you some of that in a second. And then they mixed it with charcoal. That's combined with the potassium nitrate and water, and you made a paste. Now you got to keep it wet, because if powder gets dry, what happens? Yeah, because you're working around equipment. And then it's rolled, and I'm going to show you this in a minute, under 2 8-ton wheels for 6 hours. The mixture is then taken to a press mill and pressed into 12 by 16 slabs. Looks like flagstone, about 1.5 inches, 2 inches thick. Then it's taken to a corning mill where it's ground up, and then it goes to a glaze mill where it tumbles in drums, and they add graphite to the edges of the powder round off, and the graphite keeps it smooth. So if you're loading a musket with that powder, it's going to slide very easily. And then the powder's packed and stored and shipped. So that's what we're going to look at right now. Here's a different size of powder, grains, and I'm not an expert in that. Stan, you probably know better than me, but the smaller the grain, that goes to the muskets. All right, the larger the grain became blasting powder, cannon
You know,
powder.
a flintlock, you put the 4F in the flint pan.
Yeah.
And the barrel, and down the muzzle, you put in the 3F.
Okay.
You don't mix them up, because the 4F will blow up the
You'll have trouble.
barrel.
Okay, and this is some of the things they also made. They made cartridges for Colt or Whitney. And this is what one of the cartridges looked like. And they had a cartridge house. So now we talked about refining the sulfur and the saltpeter. There's some of the refineries. We're in that area now. Those are tobacco and wood storage sheds right here. But we're going to go across the street. And these are the refineries. Look at the size of these buildings down there. So you had saltpeter refinery, you had the sulfur refinery. These are storage sheds for coal, and you have storage sheds for wood. You can see that's a storage shed. Can't see way back over here, there's a steamworks. It's just a vast operation. It goes on and on and on. This is just, you can see the refined product coming out of there in the wagon. Saltpeter refinery, another refinery. Now we're inside a refinery. I got this from Hagley. All right, and that's inside of the refinery at the Hazard Powder Works. And you can see, look, it's got to be terrible in there.
How is that in relation to the river and that red barn?
This is way behind it, way behind the red barn. Yeah, if you walk out the barn, you go to the back and just keep going along the river, you're going to come pretty close to that.
By the creamery? Did it go?
It's down below the hill. There's another works right below the creamery. They call it the Wallop Hot House, the Wallop section. There's saltpeter ready for refining. And this is where they kept the woodshed for the alder. And then you had the wash house that I spoke about. There's the wash house back there where they had to report to work every day. A lot of pictures, so this is just part of more of the woodsheds. And this is where they would keep the stored charcoal. Now the barn still stands today. And that's the original barn right here, but there was another barn attached. In a second, we're going to talk about the barn crackers and the barn corning mill. That's right over here. That's where some pretty bad explosions took place. But they keep about 30 horses in there. And there's a cement floor to that barn, and it's on a slant, so the horse's urine would run down into a trough and out the door. How do I know that? I don't know. And you can see, and the workers are proud. Look at the faces. It's just fascinating that we have these pictures. And there's a wagon load of kegs. Those are probably 25 or 50-pound kegs. And so the wagons went around hauling the powder. They had to move everything around. So the horses couldn't wear horseshoes made out of metal, steel, so they wore wooden horseshoes. The rail, there you see a tram, the rails were made out of wood, and all these wagon wheels couldn't have any metal on them because you'd get a spark. So they're hauling wagons full of powder that explode. And you can see that's right on it's on a rail. See that? Look at the wheels on it. 8 wheels on the wagon. A lot of heavy powder. So there's the one-legged stool. And the wooden implement, there's shovels and whatever they used to, anything they had to shovel powder, everything had to be made out of wood. So here we are. This is where everything got mixed. It's an incorporated. This is right along the Scantic. And like they're handling this powder like it's nothing. And they load up the wagon, and this is where the 3 ingredients got mixed together and water was added. And they go up to the double wheel mill. So this wheel, I'm going to show you what that's like inside in a second. So this is along the Scantic, and that's called Man Killer. That's the nickname it got. But only 2 died. It wasn't the biggest explosion. And if I can get this to work, I'll be very happy. Please work. I'm going to have to go up. It should. Come on. You're letting me down. All right. Stay with me. This is a model of a double wheel mill. Here we go. So you can see it got its water power. We'll see that in a second. And you see the 8-ton wheels spinning around in that trough. what happened inside a double wheel mill.
Elliot, that's water power.
Water powered, yes, water powered. So this is me and Killer burning. Explosion happened in me and Killer, and it caught fire, and it's burning. And this is another upper double wheel mill. This is just past me and Killer, and that's the same mill. You can see the wagon. There's the Scantic River right there. And over here, you see the pipe that's taking water from the canal, which is up here, and that's getting its water power to drive the mill's machinery. And this is the upper double wheel mill burning. All right, so this is the double wheels. And this better work. Here we go. So that's the powder's in that trough down below. Oh, sorry, they're just, stay with me. Let's start it again.
Elliot, question back here.
What are the rollers made of?
I couldn't tell you, iron of some type, I'm not sure.
It was metal.
Yes, they weighed 8 tons. Good question.
Probably brass.
Maybe bronze.
Yeah. Oh, did it again. Okay, we're gonna get this right. No, we're not. All right.
And how long do you have to leave the powder in there again?
6 hours.
Degree? Huh?
6 hours.
6 hours.
Yep. All right. Here we go. I'm not going to touch it now. So this is a working model. This is at the Hagley Museum in Delaware. This was the DuPont powder works that Hazard conspired with. So you can see the powder down in that trough. They did a demonstration on testing the powder. And this should be the beginning, but it's the way it got recorded. They're opening up the sluice gate to let the water in. You probably hear me back there. And the water's rushing in. And it's going to hit the turbine down below. In essence, a water wheel. Starts the shaft spinning. Gets transferred over to both sides. Mine shaft. And you can see the gears spinning. And this is underneath the double wheels. Some did it above and some did it below.
All that would have to be maintained, lubricated, et cetera.
Yeah, maintained. They had artisanal shop, blacksmith shop, brass shop. I mean, they had everything you could possibly have. And then you see the wheels.
Elliot, isn't that shaft, isn't that part of that still down there when you walk by and you see?
It could be, yeah. Okay, now we get to the press mill. So that's where they brought the powder after it was mixed together and was still wet. And they pressed that into cakes. So you can see those faces there. And this was a very dangerous operation. This is one of the explosions. 3 men were working about the buildings in the morning: John Mathers, Frank Porter, and Thomas Gibson. The 2 former were rolling a car from the small building to the press mill, only a few feet distant. Gibson stood in the door of the building watching his fellow workmen, who had gotten within 15 feet of the press mill, when the explosion occurred. Gibson was thrown down, and a portion of the structure fell upon him, injuring him about the head and back, and cutting his face, but inflicting no serious wounds. When the smoke had cleared away, search was made for Mathers and Porter, whose bodies were finally found in the water of the sluiceway, a short distance from the press mill. They presented a horrible sight. Mathers had his right arm blown off up to the shoulder. His face was badly disfigured, and there were several holes in his breast and other parts of his body. He was about 37, leaves a wife to whom he was married but 7 months. Porter's body contained a few marks, but his face was blackened and nearly all of his upper portion of his head was blown off completely. He was 35 and unmarried. And this is what the people are reading in the paper. I have more. Anybody want another one? Or should I keep going? All right. So this is how they move the powder around, and that's called an angel buggy. And that's an actual slab of pressed powder right here, Kentucky rifle powder they called it. And that's how they moved the powder around, went from the press mill to the corning mill. And I say called it an angel buggy because if it blew up,
You were an angel.
yep. And there's another one. That's at the Hagley Museum. And this is the corning mill where those slabs were then broken up. And this is inside of another one. All those tines would break apart the powder. This is next to the barn. All right, this is where some serious explosions took place. And ironically, behind this building is a blast wall. It's a big brownstone blast wall. And it's really the only place where you see a stone blast wall in the entire 400 acres of the operation. I think because further up the hill a little bit were the offices. That's my theory, because you don't see it any other place. And this was the site of the worst explosion that took place. So they call this the barn cracker, barn corning mill. And this is the double wheel mill after it exploded. That's an actual photograph after it exploded. And that's the blast wall that stands today. And if you match the stones up with some of the pictures, you can tell really what was there. So forgive me, I want to read this one. I won't read too many more of these. But this is the horror of the mill. Yesterday afternoon, about 3 p.m., 5 wheel mills of the Hazard Power Company blew up. So one blew when they went off in succession. And they were supposed to be far enough not to have that chain reaction, but it did all the time, because these were horrendous explosions. Some were heard in Springfield, Northampton, East Brookfield, Hartford. They were just horrendous explosions. The 5 mills were several hundred yards apart and were substantial buildings, some 20 by 30 feet. And the first mill that exploded, there were 6 men at work. And they, with the building, were blown to atoms. One human foot, which was found a quarter of a mile distant, was all that could be found of the 6 men. One man was crossing a bridge with a mule and a cart near the mill. Not a vestige of the man could be found. The mule was torn in 2 parts, one half being thrown across the stream, the other thrown over the trees into a field several hundred feet distant, while the cart was demolished. Another man was bathing in the stream. He was found lying in the water dead, with a large stone on his head. A large elm tree several feet through was broken off and limbs scattered in all directions. It was reported that a large piece of iron was thrown into one of the cartridge buildings, and this is when the one female died, fracturing the skull of a girl working there. Just terrible. Of course, no one can tell the cause of the explosion, as every man about the building was blown out of existence. So I'll spare you another one right now. Anybody have any questions?
Is that picture on Stoker's Farm?
Is that Stoker's Farm?
Yeah.
No, Stoker's Farm is beyond. I'll show you where it is in a second. Remind me when I get to what I call the upper dam. We're almost there. And it's Stoker's. Yes, sir.
We all understand, that sparks emission occur because of scrapes, sparks, whatever. Were they also aware in that time about static electricity itself, bonding and grounding?
I can't answer that for a fact. I know in the reading about the people having the dust on them.
Yes.
And the explosions in the dust house where they take the powder and sift the dust out. There were terrible explosions there, so probably, to your question, they probably did. I read some historical fiction saying that's exactly what happened, but it's historical fiction, so I don't know that for a fact.
Thank you.
All right. All right, so this is just some more buildings going up and down the river. Here's a hothouse, that's where they dried the powder. Tom Kennedy's in the doorway, and this is where they stored the sulfur after it was, before it got pulverized. And some more buildings, and you know, a lot of railroads, a lot of carts. You can see and we can find berms down there. You can trace where these tracks went. This is a picture of the glaze. I said this is where the powder gets tumbled and gets smoothed out. And if you go up the river, you can see a large intake pipe coming in. It's in the bank of the river. That's another picture of the glaze. Now we're going up towards Stoker's Pond. And that's that's a drum that the powder would be glazed in. And this is the Cooperage building, because they made all the barrels and kegs there. So you can see all the workers are lined up right in the banks of the Scantic. And those buildings were storage and where they produced. They're all carpenters and making the barrels and staves. Well, here's the machine shop that we're talking about. So they had to fix everything. That's an actual photo of the machine shop. And this better work too. So this is at the Hagley, but this is the water power that was used to power the machine shop. Nope, I gotta go up again. Here we go. So the sluice gate's been opened, and you're going to see the water rushing in. All of a sudden, those gears are going to start to work. Here comes the water. The power of the water. Now the gears are going to start turning. Pardon a photographer who's a little excited. There they go. And that's going to power a belt that's going to go about 150 feet up the bank to the machine shop. This is not at the Hazard Powder Works, this is at the Hagley Museum, but it's the same principle. Incredible amount of force. Yeah. Right there. A little water coming in. And we'll go up just a second. And that water flew into the Brandywine after. The DuPont was really involved with Hazard so much. I mean, they tremendous correspondence back and forth during when Hazard was alive.
Fortune.
Yeah, started early on, and here we go. Now we're going to go up. I don't want to keep you too long watching this, but I just want to see the belt going up. Come on. All right. Well, you get it. I don't want to keep it. Come on. Here we go. See that? And that's going, you see it spinning up there? And that's going into the machine shop. Okay, and that's the machine shop in the Hack. That's where the belt is. And that's powering the lathes, everything in there. Any piece of equipment, there's an incredible amount of belts up there. They just slide back and forth through, depending on what piece of equipment they want to operate. All right, so that's the machine shop that was at the Hazard Powder Works. And
Elliot, does he use water power completely, or does he end up putting a steam engine in?
water and steam,
So does it steam?
but a lot of time the steam was a backup if the raceways ran dry or
It's
froze.
cheap.
Yeah, good question. And this is where that belt was, and that's water powered from here and goes over to that machine shop. And that's another machine shop. And this is the machine shop today. It's called the paint shop on Dust House Road. John O'Connor bought that and remodeled it. He said it was a wreck when he bought it. It was all falling apart. Okay, there's an office building that still stands. And this is the canisters. This is the final product being stored in the canister storehouse. And that's the powder mill ball field. If you go down and know anything about Enfield, the brand new field that just got redone. It's down there where the baseball diamond is now, but that's where the powder was, and it was packed there, and it was shipped out on the wagons. So, and as they're loading up, this is more buildings in that area. And looking down, you can see that's not a good photograph, but that's still of the canister packing.
How many people were employed there?
At one time, I'm not sure how many they had as a full staff. It had to be well over 100. But yes,
Where did the families live and how far away did
if
these
you
have to
come down South Maple and Hazard Ave, you see all those very small homes that have been added on. And I've got the history of them. They're all 1840, 1850.
None of them were blown up in any of these?
No, the home, not up, a glass blew out, and people's inside of their homes were shattered. But those homes didn't blow out. But the officers lived in some beautiful homes off of Hazard Ave. One's called Fairlawn. I mean, they're just spectacular old Victorian homes, and they're still there. Yes, sir.
So if 100 men were employed there in the 1850s, I mean, roughly 40 of them were smokers, pipes or whatever. Do they have smoking breaks? Obviously, they don't allow smoking in the town.
There's no smoking. They couldn't bring any smoking materials to work.
So I'm just saying, say 30 to 40% of the men probably were smoking.
If they did, they were stupid. I mean, we'll never know which one lit up a cigarette or a cigar or a pipe, right? So now they got to ship the powder out, and the powder would go down the Windsor Locks. Hazard owned powder, owned land, a couple acres on the banks of the Connecticut River, and they would ship them out by barges. And they'd pull those barges down to Hartford, and then they'd get put on ships. The railroad wouldn't touch them until the 1870s. So they had to put, and there's some great stories about kegs rolling off the dock and down off the carts. And I'm not going to read them tonight, but that's, and then in 1870, they were able to ship the powder by rail. So
Maybe he didn't want to touch the railroad because the railroad wasn't very safe yet.
no, definitely not either. So Hazard had to have sales reps all over the country to rep for the powder. So he owned land in more states than anybody at that time. So he had a depot everywhere, through the South, out west. So Hazard had an agent, a sales rep, by the name of Levi, one of my favorite people. So Levi was down in Galveston, Texas, at one of his customers. Levi was repping for Hazard powder. And they wanted some credit on some damaged powder. So Levi said that he would gladly give them a credit. So he went out to where the powder, he took all the powder, the leaking kegs, and he kicked them in with his foot. He kicked in the heads of a couple of kegs and piled the other 18 on top of the open ones. Pretty smart guy, right? As he pulled out, pulled out his matchbox. Drew, who was the agent for Hazard in Galveston, protested against lighting 500 pounds of powder at arm's length and warned Lanai that he would certainly be killed. Lanai had handled powder so many years that he was careless and replied by telling Drew that he would teach him something or two. Drew thereupon started running as fast as he could. He had only proceeded 50 yards when he heard a most terrific explosion. Turning around, he saw Lanai spinning around like a top 60 feet up in the air, his clothes being ablaze. The unfortunate man fell fully 75 feet from the spot from where he went up. Every vestige of his clothing and hair was burned from the body, and the corpse was black. Drew was uninjured. So the powder ship, and then this is what's left today. That's the dam. If you go there, that's the ruins right there. And that was the bridge that just got replaced with the lower dam, the horseshoe. This channeled water down to other ponds. And we get up to the upper sporting works, and you asked me about Stoker's Pond. Yeah, it's just, this is the Upper Steam Sporting Works. This was built in 1872, and that's what it looked like. There's the upper dam over there, and there's Stoker's is up here, over here. Stoker's Farm is still there. Okay? And this is more of the Upper Steam Sporting Works. Oh, I'm going the wrong way. And this is a ruin. That's still there today. That's up by what we call the Upper Dam. And this is the Upper Dam. This is what's left of it. You know, all the earth around it got eroded. If you go there, you got to get the lay of the land, but it's pretty fascinating that that's still there. 1846, and all through the hurricanes and everything else. All right, and this is the Upper Steam Sporting Works. So this is the other blast wall. There's a blast wall. It's made out of timber. In between the buildings, there's another one over here. And that's it there. There's Stoker's Farm, you can see. And that's more of the buildings. And this is the mixing house. There's the kegs of powder. And then we get to, there's a good picture of the blast wall, the logs. And then on September 13th in 1913, this exploded. And that's the ruins of that explosion. I'm sorry, January 14th. And this is the last working mill at the Hazard Powder Works. They had closed down most of the other ones. The powder business went up and down, and technology changed, and this was the last one still working. So on January 14th of 1913, 3,000 pounds of powder exploded in 4 separate explosions at the Upper Steam Sporting Mill. 2 men were killed and several others injured. The roar was heard miles away. One of the men killed was Charles Blum, whose brother Alfred was killed in an explosion in 1898. Alfred's wife had just married Charles. Chimneys toppled, glass was shattered, blazing fragments thrown in all directions. Flying trees shot through the air. A traveler at a distance saw a wrecked roof sailing through the air above his head. The blast was felt with force in Springfield. Housewives reported the rattling of the dishes in their china closets. And with that, the last mill closed right after that. And that became the end of the Hazard Powder Works. And after it closed, they shipped some of the equipment out to outside of Albany. And then over the course of time, residents in the town, I think, went down there and took all the bricks, took all the wood, everything was stripped because they could use it. It was just sitting there. And we know where a lot of the ruins are. And I'll take anybody out there that wants to go with me. I don't think it's going to come with me. You guys got it. But it's a lot of fun to go around there. So I'll close with this. This was something that somebody wrote about the powder workers at the Hazard Powder Mill. I think it's quite true. The work of making powder is fraught with danger. A man never knows when he goes to work in the morning whether he will come home alive. The housewife whose husband, father, brother earns their livelihood working in Powder Hollow lives in a fear of a catastrophe that will rob her of her loved ones. Familiarity with danger seldom makes them so callous that they do not experience a tug at the heartstrings when their men leave for work. So that concludes the Hazard Powder Works. And I thank you very much. Anybody, I'll be glad to answer any questions.